First for breaking news and the best live sport.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Hello, good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Tuesday. Victoria Derbyshire with you on 5 Live with the latest news, sport and interviews between now and noon. As Tesco withdraws their everyday value spaghetti bolognese, we'll ask what beef dishes will they find Horsemeat in next. And we want to hear from you. How is the continuing Horsemeat scandal affecting the way you shop? 0500 909 693. Here's a man in charge of wholesale distributors.
We've been dealing very closely with the Food Standards Agency, and our members are undertaking tests, having some information available by Friday to reassure customers that the beef products that they buy, which are labelled as beef, are on the whole containing nothing other than beef.
We'll talk to the Food Standards Agency in the next 15 minutes. Plus, 5 Live, Victoria Derbyshire with you this Tuesday morning. If you're going supermarket shopping over the next few days, what will you steer clear of as a result of the Horsemeat scandal? Almost every single supermarket in this country has been affected. The latest product to be removed from your shelves is at Tesco, their everyday value spaghetti bolognese, because tests showed it contained up to 60% horsemeat instead of beef. It's probably worth reminding you of exactly what has been removed from supermarkets in the UK in the last few weeks. Tesco's everyday value frozen burgers, quarter pounders, all Silvercrest products, and those Findus beef lasagnas, which weren't very beefy but did contain horsemeat. From Sainsbury's, it's their own label frozen burgers. From Asda, it's freezer meat frozen burgers. From Waitrose, Dale Pack frozen burgers have gone. From the Co-op, it's beef quarter pounders and frozen beef burgers with onions. From Lidl, it's Moordale frozen beef quarter pounders. From Iceland, it's 4-pack quarter pounders and 4-pack 100% beef quarter pounders, presumably because they're not necessarily 100% beef. 5 products have been removed from Aldi shelves and from Morrison's. Remember, their spokesman was on our programme on Friday saying sales of ready meals had been unaffected, but it was early days. They've removed Ross beef quarter pounders, Dale Pack 4 beef quarter pounders, those Findus lasagnas and Adams beef burgers. Well, the Environment Secretary is going to meet representatives of the Food Standards Agency again today, along with the Institute of Grocery Distributors, while we all await the results of further tests on various products to see A, if they contain horsemeat, and B, if they contain bute, which is a veterinary drug given to horses and which is potentially harmful to humans. So tell us this morning how, if at all, this scandal is affecting the way you shop. 0500 909 693, or you can text 85058. We'll talk to a spokesman from the Food Standards Agency at 10:15. First, the chair of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee, Anne McIntosh, and then we'll hear from a director of the National Beef Association, and then an expert in global food security from Belfast. Anne McIntosh, how do you assess where we are now in this unfolding crisis?
Good morning, Victoria. Well, it is, as I feared 2 weeks ago, unfolding very dramatically. I said then it was the tip of an iceberg, and it's very regrettable. I think part of the problem, thinking about it, is the way we eat. If you pardon the pun, we are eating increasingly on the hoof. And whereas before we used to have a family roast, a family dinner on a Sunday, which would be locally produced roast, it could be beef, lamb, pork, whatever, it could be ham, and then you'd reconstitute that during the week in different forms. So we weren't actually dependent on processed and frozen foods to the extent that we are now.
So it's our fault, it's the consumer's fault?
I think it's a good moment to pause and look at our shopping habits. And one thing I would say is that no...
But what's wrong with buying a frozen beef lasagna, if it indeed is a beef lasagna?
Why not make your own lasagna with meat that you've cooked yourself
Why isn't
earlier in the week?
your ire directly at the suppliers?
Well, I think the suppliers have been caught in this, what appears to be a massive fraud. If we're looking at a labelling fraud, if you're looking at an extremely complex supply chain where you wonder about the freshness of even the frozen and processed food that has passed through so many different countries in what must be quite a few days, it is a very complex web. Now, I believe that there's a very easy way forward that I'm hoping that Owen and his colleagues meeting tomorrow at EU level will look at. There is a very famous court case going back to my law school days called Cassis de Dijon, when that famous wine Cassis, which is very expensive, was copied, and fraudulently a product was passed off as Cassis and was prevented from entering into free circulation on the grounds of consumer protection. Now, I believe if this is a labelling fraud, if it is passing off, as indeed the Secretary of State and I think now the whole of the European Union believe it is, then I believe that the Commission should, for a short temporary period, look to just stop this process. What is really making me so cross is that we're putting our retailers and suppliers to all this expense. We're confusing the consumer. We're not taking our own national products that have not been caught up in this. We're continuing to take these products that we know are contaminated. Let's just stop until we find out where the cause of the contamination is coming from. We're no further forward now, 4 weeks after the first incident. Remember that the Tesco's burgers, we were told by the FSA in evidence session 2 weeks ago, could have been in the supply chain for up to 1 year. That is staggering. This has been going on for a very long time.
But just to be clear, consumers have to take some responsibility.
I believe that it's our lifestyles, it's the way that we eat. We all do it. I go in, I buy what I think is pretty much beef. I go in and buy lasagna. If I'm on my own, I'll whack it in the microwave. And I've had something in a very short period of time and I'm ready to go out to a meeting.
Chris Mallon is Director of the National Beef Association. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Victoria.
How worried are you?
Well, what I'm worried about is actually the good reputation of British beef being damaged by a product that has nothing to do with it. I feel, going back to the wine analogy, it's like the Austrian wine idea one time when they started putting antifreeze in it and still calling it Austrian wine. Well, I think that's what they're kind of doing to our beef product. Putting in something that's not our beef product, but still calling it a beef product, being sold as that. And that's... So I think, the supply chain doesn't have to be so long. It doesn't have to be so disconnected. We're a country that produces some of the best beef in the world.
Well, tell me, Chris Mallon, why supermarkets aren't buying British beef? Because presumably they can get cheaper from abroad.
They are buying British beef. A lot of our cuts of beef, etc. are. But when it comes down to some of the other products, there's obviously a price reason for it.
We'll get you back on the phone. I know you're on a train, so we are grateful. Let me bring in Professor Chris Elliott from the Institute of Global Food Security at Queen's University, Belfast as well. Anne McIntosh is still with us, Chair of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee, appealing in vain at the moment for a pause, for a stop on the imports to this country of... Well, what exactly, Anne McIntosh? Beef or horsemeat, or what do you want paused?
May I just say it would be free movement across the European Union. I don't think you could just do it in one country. I'm not trying to... I take Chris Mullen's point. I believe we should be buying more British beef and we should be using fresh British meat in these processed and frozen foods. To me, this is quite a limited problem in the sense that it is frozen and processed horse that is being passed off as beef. It's quite a limited market, but it goes into a wide range of products. And all I'm suggesting is that there's a temporary suspension until the provenance of the meat, exactly where it's come from, exactly what it contains, is found. Otherwise, it's just spiralling out of control. There's collateral damage potentially to our own beef market that has had no part in this. But the cost to the retailers, to the suppliers, to the supermarkets is horrendous. Tesco's gave us a figure of just one test of up to £2 million. So be under no illusion that this is costing the food industry a huge amount of money.
We'll talk about testing with a representative from the Food Standards Agency in just a moment. Professor Chris Elliott, good morning to you.
Good morning,
from the
Victoria.
Institute of Global Food Security at Queen's University, Belfast. Right, so we now know that the supply chain is pretty complex. Presumably you've known that all along. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Victoria. The food supply chain is a very, very complicated business. I've known about
and that's because of cost. Because British supermarkets in this country could buy British beef, for example, but it must be cheaper to get it via a French company who has an agent in Cyprus to get it from an abattoir in Romania.
Yeah, the complexity of the food supply chain has two main drivers. The first driver is that all of us consumers can have access to food 365 days a year, so we don't have to wait for particular things to be in and out of season. The second thing, and what we're facing here, is the drive to keep food prices low. So it's the economic driver to source materials from as cheap sources as possible.
Tony is in Lichfield. Hello, Tony. How is this affecting the way you shop, if at all?
Hi, Victoria.
Hi.
It is affecting the way we shop now.
In what way?
Well, we shop in a very large local supermarket by us. Actually, it hasn't been named as of yet alongside Tesco. But, they probably use a similar supplier, or if not the same supplier. My point is, if I can get that across, if they've found horse meat or horse DNA in these processed beef products, these aren't labelled. And this is a case of not of the quality. That's an offence under food legislation. So somebody somewhere, let's go back to maybe the inspectors at our borders, they're not doing the jobs properly. So what else is in these processed meats that we haven't been told about yet, or they haven't even found yet?
Anne McIntosh?
I think that's one of the worrying things, because the length of time is so slow. I think one of the surprising things that we learnt in the evidence session was that the FSA UK was told in November that the FSA Ireland were conducting special DNA tests on a range of products and that they would share the results with us. The question has to be asked, if there was a risk, and all these tests are driven by risk assessment, if there was a risk flagged up to the UK FSA, why did they not commence similar tests on similar products in November to at least have sped up the time frame?
So the Irish Food Standards Agency told the UK Food Standards Agency in November?
Yes, because obviously the products were coming our way. So,
and that was about the value beef burgers at Tesco, was it?
I'm not sure what specific products, but it would appear to have been that first contamination incident that came, the results of which were made known to the FSA UK in mid-January, yes, the 15th of January.
Right. Chris Mallon from the National Beef Association, do you have any idea yet, have you worked out yet what effect this is having on British beef?
I think so far it hasn't had a major effect except on the process side, but actually, as we found out, isn't actually British beef. Maybe I was speaking. This is just evidence of it. Speaking to, for example, local butchers who actually have actually seen an increase in their trade and farm shops because of their belief in what they're selling.
Tim in Gloucestershire. Hi, Tim. I think you're on that point. What have you stopped buying, and what have you started buying?
Well, it started originally, Victoria, at Christmas when I realised I'd put on an awful lot of weight, and our diet was very much convenience, processed, meat-based products from supermarkets.
Right.
Over the period since Christmas, we have been buying fresh meat from the supermarkets, but over the last 2 weeks, we've now taken a decision that we're going to start and support local butchers. We've stopped buying processed food at Christmas. We've now stopped buying our fresh meat, and I feel healthier. I've lost weight.
But in the last couple of weeks, you say you stopped doing some of that. That's because you can't trust the supply chain? Is that the reason?
Absolutely.
Right.
Not so much because I have concerns about eating horse, because, it's not a meat, but it's the other stuff that goes in there. I work in an industry where I've had access to food manufacturing plants. And I think if most people saw those, they would be appalled.
OK. All right, Tim, thank you for talk to Andrew Rhodes, then Operations Director at the Food Standards Agency. Good morning to you, Mr. Rhodes.
Good morning.
Where are we up to in this crisis?
Well, investigations are ongoing with the authorities across Europe, as I think most people are aware. We've got ministerial meetings amongst European countries to assess the situation, and we're carrying on to investigate, and we're making good progress so far.
What tests are you doing at the moment that you hopefully will have the results of by Friday?
Well, we've instructed the food industry to test all of its processed beef products, and we've told them to focus on the areas of highest concern. So we're looking at processed beef products such as burgers, bolognese, things like that, and we're principally looking in the first tranche for the presence of horse meat and pork and contaminants such as that, because that's where, well, the recent events have shown us the highest risk is likely to be, and we're expecting those results to start arriving on Friday, and we'll be able to give some information on what that shows us.
And are they also doing tests for the veterinary drug given to horses, bute?
Yes, anywhere where we find the presence of horse meat, the veterinary medicine phenylbutazone will be tested for. And so far, all of the tests that have been conducted that we have results for have come back as negative. And we're just awaiting the final tests from Findus at the moment.
And when the Irish Food Standards Agency told you about the presence of horse meat in some processed beef products back in November, what did you do?
Well, let me just be clear on the facts. They didn't tell us about the presence of horse meat back in November at all.
When did they tell you?
Well, they told us in January that they'd found horse meat in products, and immediately that was announced and we began an investigation. Let's just be clear on the facts.
OK, well, because it's interesting because the chair of the Environment Committee, Anne McIntosh, is with us. And McIntosh, you were clear, you were told November.
Just to be absolutely clear, what the chairman of the FSA told us, that the FSA UK were informed in November that the FSA Ireland were conducting specific DNA tests on specific frozen and processed foods. And I would have thought that would have triggered a similar test in this country from the same time of November.
Andrew Rhodes, do you have anything to say?
Well, as Ms McIntosh has quite clearly said, we were told that some testing would take place. We're obviously aware of a broad range of testing that takes place.
But this was DNA testing. It was specific DNA testing suggesting that there was a specific risk to be addressed.
Not necessarily. We weren't aware of any risk from the Irish until well into January. And in fact, when you look at the Irish test results, they found it an incredibly limited sample, which suggests there was very specific intelligence that they must have been assessing. Yes, we were aware that testing was going on, but a number of tests get conducted every year, a very large number.
And could I ask another question? Is it true that some of our tests have to be conducted abroad, because we don't have the facilities to conduct all the tests within the time frame that's been set?
Well, tests get conducted in a range of different laboratories. They get tested wherever the best laboratory is that has the fastest, most accurate tests.
So, having imported this rogue meat, we're now re-exporting it at UK retail expense to test if it is contaminated.
I think, with respect, we're confusing issues. We're talking about where tests get conducted. Tests will get conducted wherever the most appropriate laboratory is. Sometimes that's in the UK. It might be Ferrer in York, for example, or it might be Eurofins in Germany. It depends where the best test result is. I think consumers would want to know that actually the tests are being conducted in the best way possible, wherever that may be, to safeguard them from any risks there might be.
Well, Ferrer is in my constituency. I'm very familiar with their work. I'm very proud of the facility. But Victoria, I think the British consumer will just find it bizarre that we're continuing to import this rogue contaminated meat because we don't know where the contamination is taking place. And yet we're now re-exporting that same meat to be tested within an arbitrary timetable. It's just getting more and more bizarre.
If I could just clarify something, we're not re-exporting meat. We're talking about having tests carried out in laboratories where that's necessary. And I think we really have to put some of this in a factual perspective. We have two instances here where we're aware of a contaminated product. Now, we've been quite clear, 2 is too much. But I don't think it's helpful to consumers if we keep saying that there is a huge amount of rogue meat being imported into this country. There is no evidence to support that at all. We need to get on with our investigations, and we need to get on with finding out exactly how this happened. That's what we're doing. We have very good traceability that is leading us to the most likely sources of this information. That's where our focus is.
So if there's only 2 rogue samples, why have Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Asda, Co-op, Lidl, Iceland and now Morrison's lifted all these products off their shelves?
Well, I didn't say there were 2 rogue samples. I said we have 2 rogue incidents. So we know the contamination in Ireland, which is being investigated, and we know about the contamination in France, which is being investigated. Now, as you will well know, producers make products for multiple retailers, and the steps that have been taken by these retailers, which are very sensible precautions, is to withdraw those products because there is a question mark over them. They are testing them, they are giving us their results, and they are publishing their results. This is serious. This is something that is being worked on, but we have to talk about it in its factual terms, and that's what we're doing at the FSA because we follow the science and the evidence.
And what discussions have you had with the FSA equivalent in Ireland, France and Romania?
Oh, we've had very detailed discussions with them. The French are helping us very actively with the investigation. They've shared with us what they've found so far, what the traceability is, the different companies that are involved, what testing they're carrying out. As those test results will emerge, they will share those results with us. We're getting excellent cooperation. Likewise, the Romanians have already been providing the documentation that came with the meat that is under suspicion. So those investigations are proceeding very well. That's how we chase this down. That's how we get to a conclusion based on the evidence.
So how come we're no closer to finding out where the source of the contamination is?
Well, that's your assertion that we're no closer. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we have traced this back to a source. We're actively investigating that, and when we have the evidence to say this is where it came from, that's what we'll say, and we'll do the right thing by consumers.
So do you know the source, but you can't tell everybody yet because you're still awaiting, confirmation or...?
I'm not going to speculate on that. What I'll say is this has been traced back to a location. Romania has often been talked about. That does not mean that Romania has done anything wrong. It does not mean that there is anything untoward in what the Romanians have done. Bear in mind, this food, we know, has moved through several countries and through maybe several companies before it's reached the Comagel factory and been turned into a product that's come to Britain. The point is this is an active investigation, and I'm not going to come on live radio and jeopardise an active investigation and risk people who might have done something wrong slipping away. So what I'm clear is we know exactly what's gone on so far, and we'll find out exactly what's happened and get to the bottom of this issue.
OK, thank you for your time, Andrew Rhodes, Operations Director at the Food Standards Agency. A question which you may be able to help one of our listeners with, Anne McIntosh, as Chair of the Environment Committee. Peter in Burnley, good morning.
Morning.
Yes, go ahead.
I've got a fairly simple question, really, is why do we not just ban meat products from being brought into the UK until it's sorted out and they can guarantee that it is beef or it is meat or what it is?
It's a very good question, Peter, and the issue is if we banned that meat coming in, we'd have to ban our meat going out. So we'd
you've got it wrong there, because they quite simply, when we had the BSE scare and when we had foot and mouth,
yes, I've asked these
our exports.
Yeah, I've asked these questions, Peter, and I've had satisfaction that
we're too soft. The British country is too soft.
The Secretary of State has clearly stated in response to my questions that if there is a proven health scare to the public, as I'm afraid there was in BSE and foot and mouth, then a ban will take place. But we can stop the import under the labelling provisions within this country, and that's what I'm seeking to do. And that way that we would not damage the collateral damage to our own industry and to our own food industry, beef and food industry, I hope will be very narrow indeed.
So you are actually trying to ban the imports.
I have called for a ban, and it would be in the eventuality that there was a public health scare, but we may be able to do it, Peter, under labelling provisions, and that's what I'm currently exploring.
I think it's a bit harsh that we always sit back and we always protect everybody else.
Peter, it's because it's not a health scare at the moment. It's not a health scare,
and we don't wish it to be.
But
but if we can do it on labelling provisions, I hear what you say, Peter, and I shall take that to the Secretary of State for you.
Do you think he's doing a good job? Sorry, Peter.
What I was going to say was that I think that the difficulty is that we react too slowly. People in Europe banned it before they'd actually got to the bottom of what the problem was and where it was coming from.
I can assure you, Peter, they knew that there was a health scare to human health, and we're hoping that there isn't in this case, but we're watching the situation very closely indeed.
Is Mr Patterson doing a good enough job as Environment Secretary?
I believe that it is now beyond just the problem of this government. It is a European-wide problem, and we need a European-wide solution, and we need it very quickly.
Is he doing a good enough job?
I believe he's doing a very good job.
Thank you. Anne McIntosh, who is chair of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee. You also heard from Andrew Rhodes, Operations Director at the Food Standards Agency, robustly. Aaron?
Hiya. Hi, Victoria.
Go ahead.
Basically, I used to be a delivery driver. I no longer do it. I was a delivery driver for a major company, supplier to supermarkets, restaurant chains.
Don't tell us the name in case, you know, what you next tell us is...
I've already been prompted not to say the names.
All right, good.
Basically, a lot of the meat that's taken to the supermarkets comes from Uruguay, in beef there on that.
Right, and what's wrong with that?
Basically, it gets sold as British because we're buying it unknown as British. There are loopholes where they can repack it and put certain things on the packet as long as it's been packed in Britain.
Oh, really?
Etc. Then you are legally buying British beef, even though it's been imported. And it's the same with the chicken. A lot of the chicken that we buy comes from Brazil.
Right. But what? And you're saying it's called British chicken, not Brazilian?
It is called British chicken. I mean,
are you sure? Are you sure, Darren? That doesn't sound right. I mean, maybe it is.
Well, I can tell you now. It's how it works. I asked questions when I used to work for the company, and they said it's quite legal as long as it's worded correctly.
Okay, let's hear what.
Also, with fish, when it was frozen, if the fish was in a store, a freezer store for 4 years, and they couldn't sell it, which does happen, I used to take it to Grimsby. To a certain factories up there that no longer import fish, they repack. The repack would be then redated, and that fish would then be sold as being freshly frozen again. And that happened 3 times a week. I would do that, and it's shocking. And majority of the stuff was prawns, and they were being sold to the major supermarkets.
Right. Okay, interesting. Thanks, Darren. David, hello.
Hi there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to all these meat processors. They have made my year by doing what they've done. People will now realise what rubbish and absolute ridiculous parody of the word meat these things are. And it's great for people like me.
Do you think consumers thought it was decent meat? That, you know, when it says, you know, up to 25% beef, the rest of it is goodness knows what. Do you not think we realise that, or... No, not at all. I think there is no such thing as cheap food. There is fantastic value food, which is a very, very different thing. But if you whatever you buy the best you can afford and use all of it, and then it becomes great value food. Okay. Thanks very much, David. Thanks for coming on. 0500 909 693. That's our phone number.